I'm here with Mike Goode. What do you think the difference is between a good QA and a great QA? Or a good tester, or good, like, whatever kind of software tester, quality assurance, versus like somebody that stands out?
Coming out with those heavy-hitting questions. I would have to say a good tester would be somebody who's able to do their job and do it at a very proficient, I would almost even say a little bit above the level of expectation,
Okay.
and are able to focus on the stuff that they're doing and what their team is doing.
Right.
And I would say a great tester is somebody who can do that and at the same time have an impact and think about everything around them too. So I guess in my mind, a great tester is someone who just knows the product so well that they can jump into anything and be like, hey, you're doing this, do this, so break this, so do this. So I'd say a good tester could be somebody who's good at their sliver, and a great tester is somebody who's good at the wider picture.
Something that I kind of heard about, or like through interviews or whatnot, is like there were sometimes the people were looking for somebody who can do more than just execute something. I'm not sure where I was going with that.
I think I kind of see where you're going with it. I guess maybe you're seeing it as, or you've heard it as like they want somebody who, and so people who can execute on something and be proficient at what they do, you can give them something and they'll do it. Usually the next step up means that you have to show a greater impact.
Right.
And by showing greater impact, it's less about someone giving you something to do and executing upon it, and more about coming up with that something. And then either executing on it or giving it to somebody else to execute. Would you say that was kind of like what you were going at?
Yeah, that's definitely what I was trying to come up with.
I'm really good at interpreting your thoughts.
So, do you feel like somebody who is a good tester or good QA or good at QA is somebody who can become great, or do you think that people who are great in their field were always kind of had some sort of element to them that kind of picked them up past good?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I feel like there's personality traits that you developed in your life that will make you great, I guess. But then there's also stuff that you can learn or just have the opportunity at a certain job or a company or on a product that you may not have somewhere else, that gives you that ability to move past the idea that you're just a good tester to a great tester. So it's like environment and nature, I guess.
Nature versus nurture kind of thing?
Yeah. Though it's kind of like you can be nurtured into greatness, but you can also you also need some sort of ability or almost like a want to do it too.
Yeah, I guess there are individuals who may be taught the things they need to do more or to be better, but if they don't actually practice them, then you can't progress anywhere.
Yes, and also it's the same thing too, is where it's like you could be taught something, go work on a project at a company, and you have like, oh, you're just the QA person, so you can't participate in this, or you can't say this, or oh no, that's not the place for you. So it's like having that environment, your work environment, where it allows you to step in and say something, or step into other, silos of the project.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in those environments where the QA was just the QA, which just meant that you do the validation of things. You basically check off a list of stuff, and that's about all you were really expected to do. I mean, part of that is also that they had like other people in roles that made those things for you to do. So there was a role that existed beyond that, but they hired specifically for like one person makes the stuff, the other person runs the stuff. So it's interesting to think about, like, if not, I guess it's true for anything really, that if you don't provide the right environment, it's not gonna grow.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting idea to think about, being able to expand somebody's horizons, to show them that there is, more out there than just the day-to-day check stuff off verse.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do also with how you're teaching that person. Because I'm always a firm believer that, maybe this is the reason why I should have didn't do as great as I could in school, but I kind of feel that like there's not like a one fit teaching style that fits everybody. So if whoever you're working with or whoever you're teaching, if you can adapt how you teach somebody to how they want to be taught, and then I think it's much easier to show somebody or give somebody the ability to become great.
Yeah, I very much agree. There's rarely a one size fits all solution to any problem, and it's unfortunate when a one size fit all is applied to somebody who needs something more than that, because the only thing that it's going to look like is the person's doing bad, but that may not be the case. So yeah, that's unfortunate. Do you think that there were any issues kind of throughout your career in this type of role that you found difficult, or something that you kind of had to overcome to move beyond those issues?
Yeah. I think I've always had to prove. I mean, I guess anybody has to, but like prove your worth. Of what you can do against the industry expectation of you. And I think this always happens in QA, because I feel like as QA engineers and QA analysts, we think we know we can do more, we can have a greater impact, but most of the time you get shot down with, well, no, QA here don't do it that way, or that's not how QA works here, or QA people don't do that. So it's like, instead of being open, having other people being open to like, oh, wow, that could be helpful. Let's try it. It's more like I have to prove the worth of what I'm trying to do to those people first, and do it and show an example before, So I feel like I've always ran into the issue of having to do so much extra work when something seems so simple to do in the first place. It's like, the magic school bus. Miss Frizzle used to say, get messy and make mistakes. It's I kind of live by that motto, but I also live by the motto of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So it's like, in most minds, it's like, hey, I got this idea, let's do it. And I hear somebody say, oh, QA, don't do that. It's like, next time I'm not going to ask you if I can do it, I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to show you that worth. So, and I guess because of that, majority of the times I go out and I do something without bringing it up, because I know in my past companies and current companies that most of the time it's a no. So overcoming that bias against you as the industry bias of you as a QA.
Yeah. Do you think there have been any times where that has maybe bitten you from going that direction? Or do you feel like every instance where you've kind of applied that reasoning has paid off in the positive?
There was a time at a previous company where it did bite me. But to be fair, it bit me in the end, but the what it uncovered, I think it provided a much larger impact.
So there was
to the project.
Some sort of net positive.
Yeah. There was a project I worked on where I was like, hey, I really want to test the APIs. We built all these APIs for this project to replace this other system, and we're not testing them. They're like, oh, there's no need to test them. They're not going to be used yet. And I'm like, well, what if they hook into them and they have all the documentation, they start using them? Oh, no, they're not going to do it yet. And it's just like I went behind, my PM's back, the engineering lead, and the devs, and I just tested all of them. And I found a slew of issues. Turns out that the way that they were supposed to be built by the requirements set by the customer is not what the devs actually built. So it caused this consulting company, it caused them to go back to the client and be like, hey, we made a mistake on something we delivered, we need to kind of rebuild it. And so it cost us a little money as a company,
right.
But at the same time too, it's like if I didn't catch that because we weren't going to build a front end that utilized the back end, we just built the back end for them. So they would have 6, 7, 8 months down the road, they would have started building that front end for it, and then it would have been all broken, and they would have come back to us, and who knows what would happen. So by me not asking that direct permission of like, hey, I'm ready, can I test this? I just went out and did it. And yeah, managers weren't very pleased, but in the long run, I think it was better for the project.
And do you think you, during that process, you thought about the risks of well, what if I uncover something that is, a large issue where things are going to have to be redone? Or do you think you were
at this company, from the experience of working with these developers, I knew a lot of these developers liked bending their requirements, either because something was not super cool to work on, or that they thought they could build it better in a certain way if they bend the requirement. So this was kind of in place, this mentality within this company, and so because of that, I knew hey, we need to test everything.
Yeah,
we need to verify everything.
So there was some sort of historical data used to say things may not be right, so it's better to check it.
Yes. And I think the business analyst in the project just did all the happy path testing on it. So all the happy path stuff worked, but once you start passing in stuff you shouldn't pass in or try like negative case type testing, it just spewed errors out left and right, and not the correct errors. So, but
is there anything from previous roles that you find yourself reflecting on where you are now that you can kind of directly point to, like something you learned there and that like you're now able to apply where you are?
Yeah, I think a really good example of that is, so that same consulting company, one day, this one PM I worked with who was like amazing PM. I mean, this person could look at a mock-up, look at the front-end design on the computer, and tell you stuff's off by a pixel. I mean, he just had a really great set of eyes and all this other stuff. So one day he invited me along to all the UX and UI design meetings, and I realized that I could have a greater impact if I started shifting left more. And so I know when I came to Sprout, that was like my main, I would say my main focus, but kind of like an expectation. Like, so there was a time where it was like, oh, there's a design review meeting. I'm like, to the PM, I'm like, hey, can I get an invite to that? And then I was hit with, oh, QA don't go to those meetings. I'm like, why? He's like, well, we don't want you to start writing defects and bugs and stuff that's not built yet. And I'm like, why? And so now I've felt like I've had to prove the worth of me reviewing designs or having engineering review designs before stuff's built.
Right.
So yeah, and that's like, that goes back to the whole thing of like bias too. Like there was somebody at the company who might have at one point been put into that situation in these design review meetings, and they, you know, gave the rest of the team like a negative result or impact of it. Like, oh, I'm gonna write bugs on this, but it's not built yet.
Yeah.
Or something like that, right? You know, and so it's like, yeah, I'm not that person, so now I have to prove my worth in that. So, but I feel like having my first job, because that was like my first job, when I got introduced to like shifting stuff left, kind of gave me the idea of like, well, I don't need to be that in that silo after dev. Right. I can be anywhere through the cycle. I can have an impact almost anywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely something important to take away from that type of role, since that's not, I mean, I guess I never did any sort of like traditional education in like software testing, but like that doesn't seem like something that's typically taught, is the fact that you can have impact in more than just one area.
I had one course on software testing. And it was on unit testing.
Okay.
On the types of testing too. But they really glanced over the idea of like who does what or who should do what. And basically just reinforced the idea of like, you're the developer, you should write tests, your own tests. So I don't think you missed out on anything formal education wise.
If I did, I've probably already made it up anyways.
Yeah.
There's
Can I turn the tables on you and ask you a question?
Sure.
What is QA?
What is QA?
Yes.
The role or the act of
let's
quality
say
assurance?
If you had explained to a person in sales or success,
Okay.
like what is QA?
I mean, I don't know if it's the best answer. It's probably not the best answer, but I have had to explain to people not in the role what I did when I said that I'm a part of QA. and I kind of generalized it down considerably to essentially I help to make sure that the way the product looks and behaves is what we expect it to be and or can provide value to the customer, which is kind of vague-ish.
True.
But that's kind of how I feel like the role is. It is kind of vague, so you can give yourself meaning into the role. I mean, if you are much more heavy on like documentation, or if you're heavy on just getting into a feature or a product that's like heavy exploratory testing focus, like I don't think there's a right way to do it, but there's definitely wrong ways to do it. So I mean, a lot of it is just more of like there's some acceptable level of quality that is the thing that can, you know, provide value to your customers and is something that reflects positively on the company that you work for, because there is kind of both of those aspects. You want to make the users feel good and the company feel good, so it's kind of a combination of those things, whatever that form takes.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer, because I know what I do,
Mm-hmm.
I know what I can do,
Mm-hmm.
I know what I would want to do, and I understand how what the industry as a whole thinks of it as, and then I also understand kind of like how other members of the team think of it.
Mm-hmm.
How what they think of it is influenced by their past experience in the industry, and because of that, you get that like, oh, I already know what it is, and so, you know, I may not always listen to it, you know, your opinion on it, but I already know what it is, so I'm fine.
Well,
I'm not trying to be cynical or anything like that. I'm just trying to like, I'm not saying like I'm not listening to your answer on it, but I just feel like when you get asked a question like what is QA, or explain what QA does, it's very like, I don't feel like I'm always explaining it to the way that may be the same as somebody else within the company.
sure. Yeah, I mean, there is kind of the role takes many shapes, so it's hard to, you know, pin it down to like one exact thing. I know I've had problems thinking about what exactly I do. Sometimes I have said I make sure the product is good and doesn't break. I think I've said like I make sure that the whatever design says they want a thing to be or do, that I make sure that it does that. There's for each of those things, there's always more to it than that, but sometimes it's easier to just kind of go with just something short and sweet to kind of move a conversation along. Yeah, so I mean, QA involves many things, and so pinning it down to one thing is hard.
Very true.
And that's definitely something I've struggled with, trying to figure myself out, figure out what exactly I feel about it and what it means to me.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a multifaceted role. Can be, and it kind of should be treated as that such too. So
if you were to break QA into the different roles that it covers, which ones do you think that it kind of has similarities to?
I would say that it does it has very similar roles to kind of a business analyst or product manager. I think it takes from business and product, takes from design, and it also takes a lot from development and architecture. Because you need to know how the system works, back end, front end, right? So you need to have that knowledge. You need to have some knowledge of that a developer has of the system. That our software architecture would have too. You need to know how the user experiences the product. At the same time too, you need to understand the UX patterns and some of the psychology around it, which I feel is very indicative of design. Design knows all that, or design should know all that, but
design, UX, those things.
UX, yeah. And at the same time too, you need to know the features, the user types, the customer range, who's using what, how it's being used, and I feel like that's very borrowed from product and kind of like business analysts. And you can say the same thing about like any other discipline. You can say, well, like a front end developer would need to know this, or a back end developer would need to know this. But I feel like you can write code just based on specs and requirements, and you don't really need to know how it's going to be used and exactly how it's used in the end.
Sure.
I mean, if a front end would need to know that and need to do that, and then they wouldn't, be sending stuff to us and be like, hey, if I use this type of user as this type of thing and this type of thing, it breaks. That wouldn't happen. They would be able to build and test everything themselves. So I feel like, at the end of the day, I've always felt like a QA is kind of like that quasi product expert. That they will know the product, I wouldn't say like super well, but they will know it enough to make, make greater impacts in areas and stuff. And I feel like that of those like traditional roles, that's where it pulls in. And then you're pulling in, like risk management from multiple type roles, because that's kind of all roles have some sort of risk management. So risk management and just general testing knowledge and other stuff like that. So I feel like it is multifaceted. And I also feel like as a QA, you have the potential to move into any of those roles. That all depends on the company you work for.
Right. Yeah.
So,
those roles may or may not be available, or there may or may not be the need for another person in that type of role.
Or maybe it's not a path that somebody within the company thought that a person in your role could do.
Right.
So that goes back to the idea of like, you're just a QA.
Yeah, I mean that is something that exists. So, do you think what do you think would be a way to get people out of that type of mindset? Or what is like an action that you feel like you would do to kind of, expose QA as something more than whatever just a QA means?
I would drop QA from the title.
Okay.
I would also drop QA from any Jira board as to a QA as if a column's named QA, or if a part of the process is called QA.
Yeah.
And by not using it broader, I would hope that would have some sort of impact, and really try to help get people to stop, mentioning QA or this and stuff like that, because I feel like it's just become a catch-all, and now I've been in situations here too, where it's like I'm the only person working on the team, and they'll be like, well, QA can look at this, and I'll be in the room being like, hi, my name is Mike, I'm the only one here, you can just say my name, Mike, just you don't have to say QA, you know that I'm the QA person, so you can just say Mike, but
that's interesting.
but I think dropping QA from the title, and maybe it's just like, I mean, one of the things that the industry is going towards is they're just calling people quality engineers. That's fine, let's do that. Call of us like software quality engineers or something like that, SQEs or something. Yeah, and I think just like, I don't ever use the term QA. Like, I don't ever say, oh, I'm done QAing this, or here's a QA process. I'm like, or here's a testing process, here's a risk mitigation process or something. It's so yeah, I would hope that stuff like that, like little stuff like that, would kind of show that, hey, we're moving away from using QA.
Sure.
And I think no matter how many times you want to keep the QA title around in QA and columns and stuff, and then you might say like, hey, I'm just going to give some presentations and tell people why they shouldn't be using QA. And that's not going to do anything, because you saw that it's being used semi-improperly elsewhere. So, yeah, I think those are like the two big things I would change to kind of get people away from that, that bias.
Sure.
So
be more inclusive.
Inclusive, yes.
Inclusivity. If you were to go to another company as kind of like I don't know, an exchange program, what one process or like thing that you do here would you take to that other company?
I would say, I think it really depends on what the company's doing.
Sure.
I think it'll be one of two things I'd probably take. So I answer two things.
That's fine.
One is we started on my team. We started to do kind of like pre-dev huddles, pre-dev syncs, to discuss, what are we building? Are we like all set to build it? Or requirements make sense? But more importantly, how are we going to test it as a team? Right? So, how are we going to unit test it? How are we going to do integration testing? Like, what are we going to, like, what type of tests are we going to do? What type of tests do we need? What's the coverage like? Do we need to build front-end automation for this? Do we need to build back-end automation for this? And also, if it like requires front-end automation, it's like, okay, well, how can we build testability into what we're actually building? Do we need to create some sort of helper APIs to get us in and out of states, to reset states? Do we need to, do something else to make it just, add in selectors for some reason or another, and just try to, do that before like each project or each phase of the project we have a new set of stories. It's just like sit down as a group of developers, engineers, and just like talk through it and make sure everybody's on the same page. So when we go to build it, it's we're not realizing halfway through it or towards the end of it, it's like, oh no, what we want to write front end test for this, but to do that we need to be able to reset that state. And the only way we could do it is maybe if we had an API for it. For that time, it may not be within the scope of the project to do it. So
yeah,
and I guess the other thing I would want to do too is like, if whoever the testers of QA are at the other company, and if they're not participating in other aspects of the cycle, I would want to be like, let's sit down and either be just, observers in other meetings or participators and just try to move left that process. I'd rather catch a potential bug or defect on a piece of paper on a drawing before it's programmed and given to us to look at. So
yeah, those are both things that Yeah, those are both very valuable things that could really help anyone. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a tech company at all. Just having those sort of pre-planning meetings when you're going to, accomplish something, and then also involving everybody in those meetings and or other meetings that happen to be able to be observers and find those or provide those different perspectives that not everybody may have.
I think another piece of it too is something that'd be maybe helpful to bring too is the idea of that, yes, quality is in my title, but I'm not the sole responsible.
Sure.
I'm not the sole person responsible for quality. That it's a team effort. So let's bring it together as a team and decide upon, communicate and understand like how we're building quality.
Do you think that, like you were saying earlier about changing a title from like QA to QE, do you feel like that achieves that by changing from a quality assurance engineer to just a quality engineer, or do you think that just having quality in your title causes a lot of those issues to come up?
I think it'll still cause those issues. I'm personally so already like annoyed by the improper use of QA.
Sure.
That I just want to get QA out of there, and I guess like an easy next step to do it is just to keep quality. But I still feel like it's in your title, you're responsible for it, and at some point it almost makes sense just to be like, well, if we're all engineers, why not just call us software engineer?
Mm-hmm.
And have a hyphen after our title, like, or comma, software engineers, quality, software engineer web, software engineer platform. It's at the end of the day, all of our titles are the same. We're just concentrating in other spaces, and that could actually open up the door of maybe you have somebody who's web and platform, or you have somebody who's platform and quality, so you start turning into like potential multifaceted role almost now. So we're all basically in the base the same thing. We just specialize in different things.
Yeah, I'm curious how you would get the quality out of the title but still be able to provide that idea of the role. Because I mean, technically, if you are quality assurance, you can that is the role of assuring quality, but to assure quality is not only on one person.
It's an interesting conundrum. Mm-hmm. It's you're at a point where it's like you want to still show value and worth.
Sure.
But you don't want to be seen as the only person that can show that value or worth, because it's a larger picture. So it's almost like you need to have like a larger change on the idea of like what, like almost like an agreement, like a different agreement. It's a different, like if you could reboot software engineering years ago, and be like, hey, we're going to create this role called QA. And this is what we're going to do, and you're going to be awesome, right? And they just don't do testing, but guess what? They're here to like promote that everybody can do quality, and they're like a person.
Like quality evangelism?
Yes. Instead of just being like, oh, that's your job, go do it. Yeah, it's a really hard thing, because it's like I don't know what can be done or what could be done to get that mentality away. It's just, I guess, time.
Yeah.
Maybe in 10 or 15 years, people won't be like, hey, can you QA this?
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's definitely something I've thought about, and you and I have kind of talked about it before, with just like what else is there to call it? Like what kind of name like fits all of the different things that QA either does or can do that they may be, not thought of being able to do just purely based on the fact that their job title says QA and doesn't say, risk management or minimal platform developer, or like outside of, I guess, going back to what you had said about, showing your worth, like you gotta show what you can do before somebody's going to let you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of that idea of like, you can't have an entry-level job in this thing until you have experience, but to gain experience you have to have an entry-level job to get into it.
I think the other problem with like titles too are you need to have a title that corresponds with the industry too. So it benefits you into finding people for that role. For example, if we decided to call our titles Quality Angels, right? And we're like, hey, we're looking for brand new Quality Angels, and I'm sure you probably won't get any QA people coming in and like applying for the job. I don't know what you'd get for that. Maybe you get some other people applying for a Quality Angel job, but
sure.
But at the same time too, it's like if I go to a different company, like, hey, yeah, I was a principal Quality Angel at my last company, and they'd be like, what does that mean? This is for an engineer role. You weren't an engineer.
Yeah.
So I think whatever you have to do, you have to align on. At the end of the day, you kind of have to align with the industry.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, you either lead the industry or follow the industry.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe in the future we'll be able to all be angels.
It would be space QA engineers.
I mean, that probably exists.
Yeah.
There's got to be some people up in space saying...
Yeah. One day it'll be, generations from now, people will be flying through space and they'll be like, good job, Commander John. Hey, you, Space QA, come over here and do the Space QA. You could imagine Star Trek, it's like Ensign Kim from Voyager. Instead of calling him Ensign Kim, just call him QA. Be like, Ensign QA, come over here. Work on this.
Actually, that is interesting that you don't ever have... I guess there probably was quality assurance or like quality control on spaceships.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
fictional spaceships.
Fictional spaceships?
They never really talk about that. But I guess it's not really about that, so.
They always show, like, in sci-fi and stuff, they show these, like, especially in newer stuff, because they have the computer animation do it, they show these, like, very intricate and, like, ways to interact with something or it's hologram. And you think to yourself, it's like, like, who's building that or who's doing that, I almost sum it up to, like, at one point, in most of these universes, like, you'll have computers and AI to the point where a lot of stuff's going to be generated.
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, most of the portrayals of it are very, like, physical. Like, the engineers are normally literal engineers. There's no, like, computer science guy that's...
Well, in Star Trek, everybody who's essentially, like, Ensign Kim, for example, right? Ensign Kim was on, I think he was an engineer. He wore yellow, right? So he was part of the engineering group. But even like the science officers or the command officers, they all had programming experience. They all talked about using algorithms and all sorts of stuff. So maybe at that point, like, everybody has programming experience, but like, who's actually building this stuff and like doing what we do now.
Yeah.
I wonder if at one point it's just going to be replaced with, like AIs that can, at least for the UI stuff, it's like AIs have so much, they have a knowledge on how people interact with stuff.
Sure.
That they can just generate a console.
Yeah. I don't see why not. Like, with enough data points, they'd be able to generate something. There's already AI being used to generate different sort of frames for cars and bikes and like other things that like utilize the least amount of material but provide like the strongest form. So yeah, I don't see why not. Which is definitely going to be interesting once that kind of expands more into like user interfaces, like figuring out what is the most ideal user interface. Yeah, it's going to be something interesting in the future.
In the future.
Not that far though.
No.
Like maybe like 5 to 10 years. Probably. If not already being done. I'm sure it's already being done.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll be like commercialized for another like 5 to 10 years. So do you want to kind of talk about your professional experience, starting from like wherever you want to start?
Sure.
Up to now?
Yeah, so my first job that I got paid for, I got in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
It was at a small consulting firm. I was hired as a QA engineer, like no experience, but after having me go through some homeworks, like very informally and some other stuff, they kind of saw like, kind of had an eye for it, or at least like a thirst in trying to break stuff. That's what people always say that, right? So I went to go work at this company, and so I was thrown on like 2 or 3 projects right away. And in my 4.5 years of that company, I spent working on 3, 4, 5 projects at a time. And so some of those projects were really small. They only had 1 developer. 1 PM, that's it. Some of them were huge. They had 14, 15 people working on it, where 12 of those people were developers, and maybe there was 1 or 2 QA people on that. But it was cool because I was able to like work with a really smart group of people that were very good at building stuff, and who actually kind of wanted me to come in and like one guy. One of the first things he wanted me to do was, when I found out about this later, I was kind of like a little bit appalled. He wanted me to go and backfill the JS unit test for him that he didn't write. Which I was like, oh, cool, I'll do that. I'll learn something new, right? Write a bunch of unit tests. Later I realized, like, wait a minute, why didn't you write these? So that was fun. But yeah, so like I had experience in back-end testing, front-end testing, writing unit tests for the back-end and front-end, doing performance testing and load testing on servers. We were still dealing with like deploying stuff to servers and deploying servers, and desktop, testing, where we actually had deployable desktop apps where we then had to play with Windows, and it's like doing that, and then getting in the same job, getting into automation, and prototyping different frameworks, and playing around with Selenium for a long time, and then doing stuff where we're trying to interact with the desktop and with Selenium and all this weird stuff, and using we didn't use Rest Assured. We used other, like, I think we used like Mocha Jasmine, maybe something like that, in JS to write unit tests or integration tests and stuff. And so so it's like that job is where I kind of like learned, or is good foundation for everything that I am now, I would say. So that was like a lot of great experience, a lot of cool stuff. I must have worked in those 4.5, 5 years. I must have worked on, I don't know, like 30 projects, which doesn't seem like, I guess it seems like a lot, but doesn't seem like a lot. But you think it's like, at least 3/4 of those projects were with a new customer client each time. So like we worked on projects that would touch 200,000-300,000 people, or we worked on projects that would touch millions of people, or we worked on projects that were probably deployed to 15 people's cell phones. So like big projects, small projects, and they all had their own, requirements and constraints, and and so it's fun. Consulting can be fun, but consulting can also be like you're building products that build products for money, and you're not building it to build the world's greatest products, because you want to still be able to have that customer come back later in life and be like, hey, we want you to build this for us now, or we can't add to this, can you add to us, stuff like that. So so I was there for 4.5, 5 years. Decided there was a time to leave, because they had no plan of like for a QA engineer to what's my career path, like what do I get promoted. So I was there for like 5 years almost, and I never got promoted. I saw back-end front-end engineers and PMs around me get promoted, and they're like, oh, well, it doesn't really mean that much in QA. And so I'm like, but it's so like, I started there 2 years after I started there. A guy started there out of college too. In 2 years, he got promoted. And I was like, where's my promotion? Got promoted to like a senior engineer, and I was like, I've been here for 5 years. I should at least be a senior, right? So they didn't really do that or have that concept. So I left that company. And I was like, I'm gonna go work for a startup. And when I mean a startup, I mean like a real startup, like 11 people. It was a friend's company. My title there was quality and solution engineer. So it was pitched to me as you'll bake quality practices within the organization. Right. At the same time too, you'll assist customers in setting up the tech and kind of being like a second line support. Okay. And then when we expand products, I know like I told me I'm interested in doing like PM stuff, so it's like oh, we'll have you do some product stuff, help us with like UX design, stuff like that. So excited for it. Turned into me being like the QA tester, first line support. So I was on call every week. Even on the weekends, like I would be like something would happen, it would page me in the middle of the night, and I would have to find a developer to pass it on to. Right. I also like set up stuff at conferences. I had to go check out conference spaces, and because we required like really good internet connections, I had to go test internet connections, and like I was working so much and doing so much beyond. I mean, I understand that's what a startup is. You do that beyond, but like that was like too much. So I kind of learned there was like think really hard about working for friends, and think really hard. Define your role. Don't let somebody else define it for you. So put your foot down if this is too much, or speak up when you're saying you're having a hard time, or even speak up saying like this is too much, why is this all on me? So, and I was there for 6 months, and after that I came to Sprout, so where I am still today, hopefully, right? Yeah, I think so.
I think you're here.
I'm still getting paid, so they haven't taken my orange stapler off my desk yet, so I haven't moved on to the storage unit.
Well, that would be strange, especially for here, because I don't think there is a storage unit.
I don't think there's like staplers anywhere. Maybe in the mailroom.
Yeah. So I guess as a last question, is there any sort of creative avenues that you have that kind of you use? I mean, I guess they don't have to be creative avenues, but something that you do to kind of recharge yourself, reset yourself into like a positive state.
I used to until I hurt myself. I used to like work out a lot. So I used to do CrossFit, and so like working out 4 or 5 days a week kind of gave me a recharge all the time. But then like I also in the summer like I go like camping and outdoor stuff and fishing, and that kind of gives me a recharge as well. But to be honest too, it's just like hanging out with coworkers. Not like, I mean, when you hang out with coworkers, you don't complain about stuff, but at the same time too is like realizing everybody else is on a similar page. Yeah, kind of recharges me. It's like, okay, let's go out and let's change this for all of us. So, yeah. Of course, talking with the great Darren. I'm surprised we didn't laugh more. I mean, I was like waiting for us to like.
Because this is I guess a slightly more serious conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing.
Darren Watson, Between the Ferns. Between the bamboo plants. No, that doesn't have the same.
We'll come up with one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
We'll have to do another one, maybe slightly more casual.
Yeah? What do you think was too formal?
No. Just at some point, I want to do like a group one where we have like a bunch of people and there's just like one topic